Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Women in Leadership Signature Series event. This is our 222nd series event. We have been in existence for over 18 years, so we're real proud of that. So welcome, welcome. You see on your screen our guest this morning, who happens to be Joan Sullivan Garrett. And she is the founder and chairwoman of MedAire, and go into a much longer introduction in just a moment. But I did want you to know who you're seeing on the screen. I'm Ann Quiello, your host, of course, senior consultant here at TurkNet, as well as an executive and leadership coach. So this morning's topic is very, very interesting. It's a topic of grit and entrepreneurship with a strong mission that probably motivated Joan to carry it through all kinds of barriers and resistance to her ideas and what she wanted to build and create. But it's also about saving lives in the air. And so I'm curious, how many of you, and if you could enter into the chat, it'd be interesting to see how many of you have experienced any kind of in-flight emergency, medical emergency, that is, medical emergency. Perhaps you yourself experienced a medical emergency, or perhaps you witnessed a medical emergency on board the flight. So I'm just curious if you could enter into your chat, how many of you had a personal medical emergency or witnessed one while on an airplane while traveling. So it's a poll question. You'll see it there in the chat. So Joan is, you'll hear later, is very much responsible for helping to save lives of those who experience medical emergencies on board the airplane. And Joan, I actually had a medical emergency on my flight, my very last flight, about a week and a half ago. And I thought about you because, of course, the announcement came on, if there's a doctor on board, if there's a doctor on board. And as someone who was a flight attendant many, many years ago, I won't say how many years ago, I recall what a pivotal moment it was for us to be able to access medical personnel on the ground versus having to rely on a volunteer who might be on the airplane, or not have anyone at all that was medically certified to help. So, so let's see. Again, welcome for those of you who are just joining us. Welcome to our Women in Leadership Signature Series. You'll see Joan Sullivan Garrett on the screen, and she is our guest this morning. And the subject is, a lot of it is around saving lives in flight on airplanes. And so we've got a question there. Have you ever had a personal medical emergency or witnessed one while on an airplane while traveling? So we have about 5 people who've experienced that. So for those of you who have experienced it, you'll understand, especially if it was personal, you'll understand how critical it is to have medical treatment at 30,000 feet in the air. So Joan has been instrumental in making sure that we have that. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I'm going to be hosting today. I'm Ann Quiello, the TurkNet Leadership Group Senior Consultant and Executive Coach and Leadership Coach. As you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A, and we will get to those questions as soon as we get towards the end of our discussion, our dialogue this morning. All right, so let me just introduce our guests. It's quite an honor for me to introduce you to Joan. Joan Sullivan Garrett was born into a family of nurses and pursued a nursing profession of her own. She became a critical care registered flight nurse and chief medical officer. In 1983, she realized while working on a helicopter evacuation flight in the remote Santan Mountains in Arizona that more lives could be saved by improving the way professionals respond to remote emergencies. And so it was her experiences there that really inspired Joan to create her company, MedAire. And it's a service dedicated to providing aviation and maritime industries with medical emergency response solutions. So eventually, Joan called for having better medical supplies on airplanes and a higher standard of first responder training. As a result, she exponentially improved the standard of care and overall safety of crew and passengers. And as a part of MedAire, Joan then built MedLink, which has been dubbed the 911 of the sky. MedLink's emergency room physicians talk directly with flight crew to help them successfully manage a medical emergency, and often avoiding unnecessary flight diversions as well. So Joan is considered a world-renowned expert in aviation, medical health, and safety. One of Joan's most notable achievements was her congressional testimony that caused the FAA to require the US airlines to carry automated external defibrillators, or AEDs, we call them, which are very important for heart attack victims, and enhanced emergency medical kits on all domestic and international flights. So before that, we had very, I want to say, scarce medical kits on board the airplanes that had very little that was helpful or useful to a trained medical person. So very important that we were able to get those on board our airplanes. It is not an understatement to say that through Joan's foresight and her innovation, her work, and the work of her companies that have saved millions of in-air health catastrophes and therefore lives. So think about it. In 1985, when Joan formed this company, the concept of telemedicine was just in its infancy and absent from the aviation industry. In those days, telemedicine was restricted to hospitals supporting regional or remote hospitals or clinics, respectively. So access to physician care from anywhere was pioneered actually in the aviation industry. No one was accustomed to connecting with medical personnel remotely, not to mention from an airplane flying at 30,000 feet. Remarkably, MedAire now handles 33,000 calls each month. We'll play an audio recording of one airline's crew that's discussing what to do with a medical emergency on board their aircraft with the medical team on board. So let's go ahead and cue up that audio. Want to give you a realistic picture or sound of what it's like to go through a medical emergency with the help of the MedLink personnel on the ground. What you're going to hear is a medical emergency involving a pregnant woman who's traveling from Cairo to Los Angeles, and she's having a medical emergency. You'll hear a woman's voice who is the communication specialist for the MedLink team, and she is doing all of the coordination of all of the resources on the ground and in the air to make sure that those are available. You'll also hear a pilot voice, and you'll hear a volunteer doctor on board. You'll hear his voice, and you'll hear the medical doctor's voice on the ground, as well as finally the patient telling us the outcome. So let's go ahead and play this audio.
I got a call from an airline. They had a pregnant female on board. She was bleeding.
15, we're en route to Los Angeles, and we're over Omaha. And we have a patient, baby, 38 years old, female. She's conscious. She's 6 months pregnant. She's traveling from Cairo. She had what she considers a contraction and quite a bit of blood.
They did have a doctor on board that felt they could continue on to California, which was their destination.
She'd been fine today in her flight from Cairo, had been feeling the baby all day long until about an hour ago, right after they ate. She got up and she just had a large risk of bleeding, which she felt to be something like a half a liter. And when I came and evaluated her, her blood pressure looks fine, running about 170. Her pulse is about 70. We have her lying down, giving her a little oxygen for the baby. The main issue is, number one, she says that when we try and sit her up a little bit, she feels like she's having more bleeding. And number two, I couldn't really hear any heart tones on the baby. She's not feeling any fetal movement at this point. And when I try and just elicit some movement from the baby just by palpation, she doesn't really feel anything. If anything, she gets a little pressure or pain when we push on the baby. She's feeling a little bit of discomfort, let's say, in the uterine area below the baby, but I wouldn't say any kind of major pain. So it seems to me that she was probably stable to get from here to Los Angeles.
And I got my doctor on the line, and he asked, well, what about the baby? The doctor says, well, you know, it's a good-sized baby. She's about 7 months, but there's no fetal movement since the bleeding had started. At that time, my doctor made the decision that we recommended a diversion to the aircraft.
The concern is that if she's really, quote-unquote, 6 months pregnant, that this child is still potentially deliverable at this age. It seems to me from the information you're giving me that that we need to have her get the medical attention as soon as possible. This could be an early abruption. You can give the control back to the pilot, and we're going to we'll have our dispatcher talk to them about diverting to closest city.
And the captain said, okay, great. We took him down into Kansas City.
Okay, and then you released the destination Kansas City, IFR. It came to you at 1550. Go ahead.
When I became very sick, at the time, all I knew was that the plane was diverted to Kansas City, Missouri, and I was taken to a hospital.
I called the hospital and talked to the charge nurse of the ER. I told her, this is the situation. We've got a lady 7 months pregnant. She's bleeding. I said, she's lost about 1.5 liters on the aircraft already. Every time they stand her, she loses even more. And I said, there has been no fetal movement. And so she said, well, I'll call in my team. Within an hour of the aircraft being on the ground, they had done a C-section, and the baby was in ICU, and so was Mom in ICU.
It helped save my life as well as my baby's life, and my husband and I like to thank them very, very much for that. Everything turned out well, and my baby's here beside me in the hospital.
Well, so it's an honor to welcome Joan Sullivan Garrett, who is the founder and chairman of MedAire and very much responsible for saving not only this woman's life, a baby's life, and perhaps the woman herself, but millions of others. So it's such an honor, Joan, to have you here with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I feel privileged to be here and be able to talk to all of the participants that are on the call with us.
Well, and you're coming from a very remote area. You're still living in a remote area of Arizona, and I know it's very early there. So a special thank you for that, for getting up so early to join us. So I know you went from critical care flight nurse responding to these remote medical emergencies all around Arizona to becoming then this country's preeminent aeromedicine pioneer. So, and it all began with a little boy, didn't it?
Yes.
Will you tell us about that story?
Yes. I, as a flight nurse and chief medical officer on board a helicopter in Arizona, I was responding to a call of a rollover accident. My crew included the pilot, which was at that time mostly very experienced Vietnam veterans, wonderful, wonderful skilled pilots, and a paramedic who worked part-time for us as a part of the flight crew and full-time with the fire department on the ground. So that was my flight team. We were scrambled, which means we were sent on this mission to a rollover accident where there was a child who was 8 years old thrown from the vehicle, and that was the reason for the call. There were other children in that vehicle. There were 3 teenagers, a driver, and the 8-year-old boy. And en route to the accident, and I have to kind of back up and say that this call has been with me for about 36 years, 37 years now. And it's with me every single day. And it's one of those things that was very different from every other call that I had had. For the most part, when a helicopter is called, you have a situation where you need to get to the hospital quickly. And it is advanced life support. And in order to be able to make a difference in people's life, usually during that golden hour, you need rapid transport. And on this particular call, not unlike others where you have patients with one foot in the grave and the other one slipping, it's always a bad call per se. And en route to the call, we were about 20 minutes into the flight, 5 minutes away from the scene, and we were canceled. And I didn't understand that. It's like, why are we being canceled? And they said, well, he's talking and he seems like he's improving. And so we don't need you. Go back to the hospital where we were based. So we argued with them, told them, look, you know, this children have the ability to compensate and they may look fine, but they're not. And this child has been thrown through the window of a vehicle that rolled over. Please don't cancel us. Unfortunately, the first responders have control of the scene, and that is a state mandate. And so we had no choice but to return to our base, which was, again, 20 minutes. As soon as the skids touched the ground at the hospital, we were relaunched back to the scene. And it's almost as if this happened yesterday. As we landed, the dust, the smell of the Jet A fuel, all of that was, you know, circling in the scene. When we landed, I asked my paramedic to please go and check out the teenagers, and I went directly to the little boy. He was alone on a backboard in the front seat of a pickup truck. And this little boy was talking to me. I introduced myself. I told him we're going to go for a helicopter ride, and that I'm going to just check him over, and we're going to start an IV on him, and it might pinch a little bit. And he goes, that's okay, I'm tough. And in talking to him, I heard an extremely high-pitched voice. And I knew at the time from my experience that this meant that he had a tumor in his airway, and that the air was escaping from his airway, and it was forming like bubble wrap underneath the skin in his chest and creeping up his neck. And so I knew that he had a mortal injury, that this was something we needed to stabilize him very, very quickly and get him to the hospital. During that conversation, I noted that he didn't seem in distress. And I was talking to him, and it was almost if he knew that he was dying, because he said, I'm tough. I'm not afraid. It doesn't hurt. Mm-hmm. And then he grabbed the collar of my flight suit, pulled me to his face, and said, I love you. Mm. And I knew I had two boys of my own, 7 and 9 at the time. And it was just so profoundly impactful. I called my paramedic, we pulled him out of the truck, on the backboard, we began CPR, intubated him, and rapidly got him to the hospital. Unfortunately, while the trauma team did everything they could to save his life, he passed away. Mm. So for several days, I took myself off flight status. It really impacted me a lot. And I thought there has to be something that I'm missing. Yeah. So I went back to the hospital. I looked up his chart, and there was his mother's name and her phone number. And I called her. Sorry, it's still, you would think after 37 years that this is something that is a little easier, but it's not. And I called his mother and I said, I have a message for you. And this is from Ralphie. And he wanted me to tell you that he loved you. And so that we both cried then, of course. And just to fast forward, last year, I actually reconnected with his mother, and she gave me so much more information about that call, that there was a fatality at the scene, and that in addition to his critical injuries, and that she contributed to my book and really painted the rest of the story about Ralphie and what an amazing little boy this was. So fast forward to that thought process of there has to be a way to improve the level of care. And being in aviation and being a flight nurse, I knew all about altitude physiology and the impact of an artificial cabin altitude of, say, 8,000 feet on someone who had a medical condition. And that's really what triggered the decision to do something about it.
Wow. And what a source for your mission you can tell it's the strong impetus that moves you forward through everything. So thank you for sharing that story. Amazing, amazing. All right. So how did you know where to even begin? So you have this amazing mission, this amazing purpose and passion. How did you even know where to begin to bring it to life?
Well, obviously, this was a driving force. And I loved what I did. I felt I was at the height of my career. Being a flight nurse was everything. We had skill sets that were physician level. We were trained by physicians to do advanced skills like putting chest tubes in and cut downs and even burr holes for bleeding in the brain. I mean, it was amazing. So I loved being able to use my brain and I loved taking care of my patients. I loved being a nurse. However, I felt like I don't know a thing about really setting up a company or a business, but at the same time, there were a lot of complaints being levied with the Federal Aviation Administration about the lack of medical equipment on board, and that there was discussion about putting out a notice of proposed rulemaking to change the level of equipment to add drugs on board that aircraft that could treat certain conditions like diabetic emergencies, heart attacks, nitroglycerin, and for allergic reactions. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I have all of that in my repertoire of drugs and equipment on board the helicopter. I know all about that. And I also understand the aviation environment, and I can, talk the talk. And I wanted to see if I could walk the walk. So I started doing my research, and I found out things that I was really shocked at the time, that CPR was not even required to be taught, although many airlines did voluntarily offer that training. And also that the first aid kits were designed in 1924 and not changed since the 50s. And I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity. I'm going to set up a company and I'm going to deliver these kits. And that's how I incorporated my company and decided to launch it. And one big problem: no money. So I had to continue to fly and as a flight nurse and part-time in the emergency department 3 to 11. And in the morning, I was doing cold calling to the airlines, to the FAA. I went to Washington, D.C. I pounded the pavements of the FAA, read all the comments and said, I can do this. I can do this.
Wow.
But there was a lot of
Of course, you had a
naysayers.
lot of- and you probably had a lot of business training, right?
Well, no, I didn't. I've always said, give me a gunshot wound to the chest and I'm great. I'm in my element. But give me some of these business challenges or doing fiscal forecasting and business plan and SWOT analysis and all of those things I had to learn from the bootstraps.
Well, you obviously knew your stuff, and you knew what the need was, and hopefully the airline executives or decision makers that you were talking to could feel the pain a little bit of not having adequate equipment on board. How did you get beyond whatever resistance there may have been to what you were trying to provide?
Well, the issue was that I could see the need. Obviously, that was my background, and I could understand that change needed to be made. But the airlines were very resistant. They really weren't interested in what I had to say. As a matter of fact, my cold calling, which I was not good at because, I mean, I had to do it, but I tried to explain, and it usually ended in about 15 seconds of someone's time, and then there was a click. So I was running into resistance everywhere. So I thought, I've got to change my strategy because this isn't working, and this is a no-go business. So I decided to try and actually succeed at educating the industry. I educated the industry to a need that they didn't realize that they had.
Mm.
So I became the preacher, preaching the gospel of medical safety.
Mm.
And I started writing white papers, publishing white papers, giving interviews for the aviation industry magazines. I took every single speaking opportunity I could through the Flight Safety Foundation or the business aviation community. And I knees knocking at the podium, but I had to become the expert. And that's how I got around this. And also, I think in the developing what you mentioned in your introduction, I had not just one idea, I had three. And that was, they all went together. The improvement of the medical equipment on board, the training of the crew, because you really can't have an advanced kit or it's like a car without wheels if you're not trained to use certain equipment. In 1985, HIV was just really becoming known. And I was shocked to see that there were no gloves on board for the flight attendants. There were no protective masks. So if they had to do CPR, they had to do mouth to mouth versus mouth to mask. So these were changes that I wanted to see happen immediately, but it took time and a lot of barriers. And when you're cold calling and you say, I'm calling from MedAire, and they go, MedAire? Who would name a company MedAire? But anyway, so it was a very slow startup, but it was a very busy startup, and travel was very much a part of it, trying to educate the market.
So how long was it between the first cold call to actually getting a customer? How long did that take?
Oh, well, I would say 3 years.
3 years. Wow.
About 3 years. But understand that I'm still not dedicated full time to this company. I had to feed my boys. I'm a single mom. And so, I had to provide for their education. And so I had to work. So I was working 3 to 11 in the emergency department and, taking flights whenever I could to supplement my income. And then, trying to get this company off the ground and building. And I involved my family. I got a call from People's Express, actually. And they, if you can remember when People's Express was this boutique airline, and they wanted 50 kits. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in business. And then after continuing to say, well, People's Express is putting this kit on their aircraft, the but they still weren't listening. So I couldn't support this business on one customer. So I had to get a little more creative. And all along the line, it was developing training courses. It was perfecting the equipment. It was also thinking about what I had as a resource, which was where MedLink was born, if you will, because whenever I had a problem on the helicopter that I couldn't figure out what was going on with my patient, I could call my emergency physician, who was my medical director, and say, what else can I do to better the situation? And that's how MedLink came into its fashion.
Yeah, you speak, and we're going to talk about your book in a bit, but you speak about that three-legged stool. So that's what you're talking about, right?
That is correct.
So there was the medical kits, medical emergency kits, and then there's the training piece, and then finally MedLink, which is the air-to-ground medical link to professional medical assistance. Okay.
It is the hotline, and it was something that, of course, no one could understand, being able to make a phone call and talk to a doctor in 30 seconds or less. That was just a concept that was unheard of. So it was really hypothesis. And in 1987, in November, we got our first call. And that hypothesis then became a reality, because we received the call from an airline leaving from Dublin to New York. And this gentleman gave me permission to use his name. John O'Brien was having a heart attack, and our doctors diverted the flight into Shannon, Ireland, and his life was saved. So it was obviously one of those validation points that said, okay, this is really going to work. And the airlines will see the value in that. And that was American Transair, and they were our first MedLink customer.
Wow. Well, we've had a couple of comments in the chat room. That one says from Nancy, thank you, Nancy. I love her grit and passion. And from Susan Hitchcock, great example of pushing through even when not entirely confident. So where did that come from? Where did all that grit and that, well, we know about Ralphie, but where did the grit, the perseverance, the patience, where did you get that?
You know, if I knew what was entailed in starting a business that never existed before, I might have been discouraged. So I would say ignorance is bliss. I went from, no after no after no. And I guess I looked at it like, well, I guess I'm getting closer to a yes, because it can't always be no. All I need is one yes. And we can move forward. So the grit, the passion, I'm passionate about helping save lives. I mean, who could not be? And at the end of the day, when you see the kind of work and the people who go through the training, who take, I tell the people in aviation that, this is the only training that you can take home with you. When you fly the plane, you get your pilot training, you can fly the plane and everything's great. But this training you can take home with you, and the feedback from people saying, I saved my father's life. He was choking at a restaurant. I mean, that is so gratifying. In terms of grit, a woman breaking into a man's industry, such as aviation, and I never really saw it as a disadvantage. I thought I had the advantage, because, when in aviation, there are only men knocking on the doors. But when a woman knocked on the door and said, hey, I have a solution for your problem that maybe you don't even know you have. And so that it was an advantage to me, actually. So passion is fundamental to, I think, any business. If you have that commitment, if you have the drive and you're willing to sacrifice, because I do believe, especially in my case, I didn't have funding. It was one customer at a time, cash and carry. So that was a part of it for sure.
Yeah. And so you had to be able to persevere with that kind of patience for 3 years. And then you were in a leadership role over an organization. I know you were a chief medical officer at one point, so you did have a team under you at that earlier in your career. But and at TurkNet, we talk a lot about leadership character. So I'm curious, what would you say were the key character shaping or leadership character shaping moments in your life that led you to be a strong leader? You had to be so successful.
Well, I mean, this is a service company, and service means that, you are there to support your customers, but it also means you're there to support your employees. And I didn't take a salary for almost 10 years just because I wanted to hire help. I needed help. And when I finally jumped off the ledge and said, okay, I'm giving up my nursing, and even though I didn't do that for quite a while, I found that the business was taking off, and I needed good people who could understand our mission, people who were as passionate as I was about the work we were doing. And they carried that forward into the business relationships, and customers became our biggest marketing because they were talking us up all across the world. Actually, day one, I said, well, planes don't stop at the borders of Arizona, and they don't stop at California or New York. They go around the world. So we have to be global from day one. And that was huge. We had to build the park to accommodate the future business. But character is something that is not really, it's hard to define. It's more about actions. And I believe character is developed from childhood forward to adulthood. And at my young age, I can look back and I can say there were people in my life that saw things in me that maybe I didn't see in myself, that I used as mentors to help me identify my strengths. And I would say for me, humility is one of the biggest. I think if you're humble, you will hear more, see more, take in more about people, both employees as well as your customers. So I firmly believe in humility. Gratitude. I am very grateful for the opportunities that I've had. I am thankful for the family that I have that supported me as I traveled 280 days out of the year to build this business. But all along the way, I always had a sense of purpose, and Ralphie was always with me. So, and there were days when the helicopter would fly over my office building and I was getting the rejection, all the no's, and, my heart would be beating, and it's like, oh, I wonder what they're doing, what they're preparing for, where they're going. But having Ralphie remind me every day that, you have a purpose. There's a purpose here. You must follow, your heart. And that's really, I was never foreign to hard work. Growing up on a cattle ranch, hard work was 7 days a week. Got to feed the horses, feed the cows, take care of the sick animals. So this was really, I think in my mind, that is a character, servant leadership, serving your people as well as your customers.
Wow, that's beautiful. And humility is, in fact, a big part of our leadership character brand at TurkNet. We talk a lot about balancing confidence with humility. So it sounds like you have struck the perfect balance. So you've really been acknowledged since all of this by the aviation industry. So for your impact and the company's impact that you've had on saving crew and passenger lives. And you were recently inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame. and which had to be an honor. I mean, you were in the great company of the Wright brothers, Neil Armstrong, and countless other aerospace and aviation heroes. So can you share with us why this industry, or what kind of impact that your company has had on the aviation industry?
I think very simply, we've shifted the paradigm from honestly the 50s into the 21st century. And we did that through providing for passengers that have changed as well as the aircraft over the years. We look at all the advances in safety in commercial airline travel or business aviation travel. And it's amazing how safe these aircraft are. In the process of this, while the airplanes have all these new capabilities and the training of the crew, but one thing that got left behind was recognition of the traveling public and all that comes with that. And I believe that the areas that were perhaps needed to be addressed was information that we could provide the industry through our data collection. We captured data on all the in-flight medical emergencies that happened. We were able to demonstrate to the industry how their level of preparation for taking care of ill passengers, which were increasing, astronomically increasing globally because of the aging travel. The aging traveler, the affordability of travel, people would bring with them their gallon bags of medications. I felt really, I was really sensitive to the challenge that the flight attendants faced every day, and how you never knew what was going to, who was going to board your aircraft and what problems they brought with them. So by helping the industry understand the nature of the traveler today and what's the best way to protect them as well as the crew was what I felt we needed to do. And we could do that through data collection. We've published papers, we've partnered with the Civil Aviation Medical Association. We've been able to globally impact what kinds of things should be on the aircraft. And you mentioned AEDs. And I think it's important for your audience to understand that with a heart attack, when the heart stops beating, with every passing minute, there's a 10% decrease in survivability. So you have to have an AED on board that aircraft because it takes 20 minutes to land that plane. Yeah. And if CPR only provides 5% of the heart's capability. So I know I kind of got off track here in terms of the accolades that I have received over the last several years, but I think it's more of a totality of what we're doing. And if others can see what perhaps me and my team have done, that recognition may inspire others to lead in the future and to contribute to the overall safety within our country and frankly globally, because we are global. I do want to make one correction, and that is we have 36,000 calls a year.
I'm sorry.
My apology on that. But at least 3,000 calls a month. But that doesn't include probably the 5,000 calls we get from crew, because we're also taking care of the pilots and flight attendants around the world when they get sick. So it's very gratifying.
So a colleague of mine, Nancy Cranford, has entered into the chat. I'll never forget how a Delta flight attendant saved my husband's life mid-flight. Thank you, Joan, for pushing so hard to provide the training and supplies needed to help passengers live to see another day. So knowing her
Absolutely.
husband, I can tell you that's very touching for me personally. Um, and I can recall doing CPR. This was before the AEDs were put on board. As a flight attendant, I can recall doing CPR on a gentleman. And we performed CPR for probably 10 minutes. It seemed like an eternity, and he passed away. So it was very difficult, and until the medical personnel could get there, and they tried the AED, and they had an AED, of course, but I think if we had had it from the very beginning, he would have made it. So anyway, huge impact. And also the impact on the aviation industry to be able to make intelligent decisions about diverting aircraft and diverting aircraft to the right location, which is another piece of what MedLink does, your company does, right, is that it identifies the best resourced for the medical emergency, the best resourced location to divert to, or it may even say no diversion is necessary, where in another, without MedLink, they may have diverted, causing a lot of passenger disruption and not being able to get to their destination and cost to the airlines. So the impact has been huge. Well, I just want to ask you, what do you say to other young women who might also have a strong sense of mission or purpose or passion, and are inspired to make an impact through innovation or through starting their own company? What kind of advice do you give?
Get started. Do it. There are so many people that have so many great ideas, but they don't have the confidence, perhaps, or maybe the avenues or to float those ideas. And a lot of great ideas go to waste. So I am, be the person you want to be. It's out there. I've always said, only in America could a nurse without a bachelor's, master's, or PhD. I always thought I had a kind of a bootstrap PhD.
I think you did.
The learning curve was huge, but it just takes step one. Take your idea. There are a lot of resources out there that can help form it to put legs to it. But failure is probably the biggest obstacle. People are afraid of failure, and I would like to share one of my most favorite statements, if I could, because I think it says everything. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dennis Waitley, and he was quoted as saying, and I'm going to read this: "Failure should be our teacher, not our undertaker. Failure is delay, not defeat. It is a temporary detour, not a dead end. Failure is something we can avoid only by saying nothing, doing nothing, and being nothing." So that's what I would say.
Wow. So just do it and be okay with failure.
Right. Because, I failed 2 marriages. I failed, my initial attempt at the airline industry. But I have also found that when my back is against the wall, I make the best decisions. And so, I believe that many women have a very strong gut. It's heart. I call it a gut reaction, and listening to that is very important.
I agree. I'm curious, how important were mentors in your life, if you had any? I don't know if you did, but what would you say about mentors?
Critical. And in many times unknowingly, we see people and we either know, wow, I don't want to be like that person, or I want to be just like that person. I want to take all of the great things this person is saying and adapt them to my life. I had mentors in my youth. I had a challenging childhood, but my tennis teacher, home economics teacher, would take me home with her one night a week after school, and I'd clean her house and she'd cook me dinner. And she always told me, Joan, you don't have to be one of these girls that gets married at 17 when you get out of high school. You don't have to marry Harry Miller. You can make something of yourself. And she was right. And Don Short, who was an ex-presidential pilot for Lyndon Johnson, became my mentor in business aviation. He's still a friend today. He's like 88 or 89, but sharp as a tack. And these people are so instrumental in someone's success. And mentors are wonderful. I try to mentor employees. I want them to succeed. I want them to realize that they can have my job if they, if that's what they want. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us all in a professional setting to give back. And that's frankly where I am today. I work with charities to support women. All those clothes I had made in Hong Kong and Singapore and Thailand and whatever, I'm donating to women who can dress for success and have interviews and look the part and what have you. So it's time for me to give back.
Wonderful. So I know you must have heard over and over again, Joan, you should write a book. So growing up on a cattle ranch, becoming a nurse and having a strong sense of mission and moving forward with your purpose and passion and making a global company, all in a very relatively speaking short period of a lifetime. So I know you did write a book, did you not?
I did.
What caused you to write the book?
Well, travel gave me so many insights to cultures and experiences that, and I'm so grateful to this company for that, because what I have seen, what I have done, what I have heard, I have stories that like renting. I had an apartment complex when my children were 6 months old and 2.5 years old. And I drug my 14-year-old babysitter with me to Scottsdale, Arizona. And I had no renters in this apartment complex until these two gentlemen showed up at the door, and they rented 6 apartments, and they happened to be, one just got out of Calumet City prison, and they were the mafia setting up businesses in Arizona, and well, they saved my bacon. I had a $3,500 a month mortgage payment to make. So people have told me over the years, they've chorused, Joan, you have to write a book. You've got to put this down in writing. And so it wasn't something that I willingly would have done, but I thought about it, and COVID provided a perfect opportunity for me to stay focused and sit down and begin writing. And I had a great editor in Texas, Melanie Saxton, and designer in Texas. I don't know what this is about Texas, but so I had a great team, and being able to put my thoughts to paper, it just started flowing, and that's why I did it. And it's vulnerable. I'm vulnerable in it. I have to admit my failures. I have to admit, some very difficult topics. But overall, I think what comes out of that is, if she can do it, I can do it.
I have read your book, and I will say it's exactly that. The message is clear. To be vulnerable and not to be afraid to be vulnerable, and to admit your failures, and how you learn from all and each and every one of them. and how it moved you forward. So we want to shamelessly plug your book. So I think we have a slide. If we could cue the slide, there it is. The name of the book is One Life Lost, and we know who that is. That's Ralphie, the little boy. And Millions Gained by Joan Sullivan Garrett. And so if you're interested in, and we hope you are, in getting your own copy, you can get it in paperback or hard book, or hardcover, I should say, through Amazon. And there's the link there, and Kathy will put it also in the chat so that you'll have it, as well as there's, so through Amazon, you can get the book that way. Or if you want an autographed copy, then go to JoanSullivanGarrett.com, also in the chat session or chat room, and to be able to get your own version that is autographed, a hard copy. So please do so. I highly recommend it. It is phenomenally written, very easy to read, a story from beginning to end that is just, it keeps you very interested and motivated to keep reading, I must admit. So thank you, Joan, for writing this book.
Thank you.
So, Joan, I've got one more question for you. I'm curious, what is next for you? You've got this amazing company. What is next?
Well, my desire is to, spread, as always, spread the gospel, to take advantage of more opportunities like being with you and your members today. And thank you for tuning in. And I'm not sure about my writing, but I do have a name for a great book called Drop the Reins. And so that's all about trust. So we'll see. I don't know. But in the meantime, I am very busy. I just spent the last 2 days planting my garlic in my garden. And that's what I'm famous for, is my garlic. And spending time with my family that I never had time to do before. So I have 3 beautiful grandchildren. My husband, who's so supportive and has been for 35 years plus, and catching up on the things that were on my bucket list that I had for so long and never did. So.
Speaking of your husband, I have to mention that I read the part in your book where your husband actually designed the splint that went into the emergency medical kits.
Yes.
And is used still today?
Still,
so it had to be bendable, right? To fit in. So right. I thought that was great.
Yeah, the jib. He designed it, still being used today. So he's an engineer. So, I'm very abstract out there, and he's very linear and very exact, and everything must be perfect. So I guess opposites attract.
Yeah, I live with an engineer myself, and so I understand. Well, we've got some wonderful questions that I'm seeing in the chat area, and hopefully anyone who would like to ask Joan a question will enter their questions either in the chat or in the Q&A. Once we complete the question and answer for the next few minutes, then we're going to bring Joan back for one more question. So you're not going to want to sign off just yet. So Kathy, are you there?
I am.
What are the questions that we have for Joan?
Well, here's one that just came in from Jennifer Thomas. Do you have any emergency kits for individuals that own small airplanes themselves?
Yes. This is, if you go to our website at MedAire, which is www.medaire.com, we have all levels of aviation kits. You would want the basic first aid kit. And I actually have those in my house because they cover everything from the most serious emergency to the basic ones. And it's what we call the AFAK, Aviation First Aid Kit. And it's a phenomenal kit. And, even for maritime, we have a whole host of kits for our maritime industry and the aviation industry as well. So because we're also in the security business, there's just some amazing apps that are coming out now for taking care of people, in a secure way, internationally. It's troubling times, of course. So, but yes, thank you very much for your question.
Okay. Our next question comes from our colleague Nancy Cranford, who is very active with veterans, with the Veterans Empowerment Organization. And she said she noticed that you've worked a lot with pilots that were veterans. Was there a characteristic that you've noticed that those in the military have that sets them apart? And if so, have you actively sought to hire them?
Well, again, this has been my life so many years ago, so I'm not in that arena. And we never really hired our pilots because they had to work with a 135 operator. We were responsible for the medical crew, the medical equipment, and the 135 operator was responsible for the pilots. But to your earlier part of your question, what I was mentioning and referencing is the fact that, like right now, Afghanistan, military are coming back from Afghanistan. Those pilots are used to flying in the worst of conditions. And the same with the pilots that I had when I was flying as a flight nurse on fixed wing and helicopter from Vietnam. And that level of expertise in an area as remote as Arizona it just saved lives. And at the time when I stepped out of the flight position, 1 in 13 helicopter programs saw a fatal accident. And they tied that back to the fact that these veterans were retiring. And what we were finding is civilians were coming into the market and did not have the flight hours. They did not have the experience in some of the types of flying that these EMS helicopters did. So the industry is addressing that themselves and through a whole host of training requirements.
That was very enlightening. Thanks. Another question. How does your team deal with today's rampant increase of mental health issues, which includes issues on airplanes?
I think we all are aghast at what we're hearing and seeing happening on the airlines. And my heart goes out to the flight attendants who have to deal with this kind of challenge. And it's beyond a challenge. And we do deal with it, and we deal with it. Even yesterday, our first priority is safety of the aircraft. Clearly, with the airline industry, that is number one, safety. And so a safety of the crew is included in that. So we're going to take care of that crew member when they land and be a part of the team that works with them. The airline actually manages that unruly passenger through their relationships with the law enforcement and whatever the causative agent is. I think we all have been cooped up for so long that there are a lot of mental health issues that we're going to see not only today, but well into the future as a result of this pandemic. But I think we also have to appreciate that the airline industry is getting the brunt of it right now.
Thank you. Yeah, it is so disturbing.
It is.
This is a happier question from Melanie Saxton. Joan's love of horses comes through in the book. How is your trusty 35-year-old Rosie doing?
I got Rosie when she was 7 years old, and she was practically starved to death. I mean, she had skin and bones and was sick, and was mistreated. And, you know, after about a year of her throwing me off, bucking me off, sliding me off, I finally told her that, you know, this relationship is not going anywhere. And you either stop doing this to me or you're going to the glue factory. And interesting, she stopped bucking me off, and we have a very close relationship. I call her my therapist because she listens, she doesn't talk back. She's a very loving little mare, and all of the grandkids have learned to ride with her. You can trust her, and she's doing good. She's preparing for winter. She's getting a big fuzzy coat. She gets lots of great food to eat and 40 acres to roam in, and with her partners, the other 2 horses. And one of these days I'm going to get back to riding. Now that I'm not writing, I'll be riding more.
So a little tough love there, huh?
Yeah.
So this question is from Susan Hitchcock, Susan, who everyone knows, founder of WIL. And she asked, do you have employees in other countries? And how do you deal with different languages and cultures in medical emergencies?
Great question. Well, yes, we do have employees all over the world, well over 200. And we have offices in London, Dubai, Nice, France for our maritime, Beijing, China, and Latin America. I mean, we're all over the world. And we have employees that are so multilingual and take care of our customers in those particular regions. As far as the calls that come in, English is the primary language of aviation worldwide. However, having said that, sometimes we're going to have a Turkish physician taking care of a Norwegian passenger with a Spanish pilot. And we have the ability within 30 seconds to bring on specific languages for this type of work. And we can pull them into the call, and we can have the interpreters on the line very, very quickly. And that's how we deal with that, because, well, being a global company, you have to have an understanding of not only cultures. I mean, you know, Heba, the woman on the audio recording, is a great example. You have cultures that you have to be very respectful of in terms of you know, their privacy and personal space.
Yeah.
And so this
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is just a chat that I want to share with you because it's so wonderful. One of our listeners said, I had hoped to listen this morning at home while cleaning my kitchen. Well, I can't stop listening intently to Joan and her smart insight. The kitchen can wait.
Thanks for that.
I just love that.
I also love well, let me ask the question on being global. You said in the very beginning stages, you recognized you had to be global from day one. Mm-hmm. So what did that entail? What do you mean by you had to be global from day one? Was that the language piece or what?
No, it was understanding the needs of the customer and being able to be forward thinking. And we have built and was building back in 1985, 86, 87, a global database. And that database included anything from not only information about when we would get a customer, what their business operations looked like, what their flight destinations were, and we would build this database. And that database includes airports, ambulances, it included hospitals, specialty care centers. That's why we diverted into Kansas City, Missouri, because they had high-risk neonatal facilities, burn units, stroke units, and this is global. And so when a pilot says, like, for example, we're flying over, you know, the North Pacific, and we have a medical emergency, and it's a heart attack. Seoul, Korea, could be our first destination or our first diversion point. Well, if you've ever been to Seoul, Korea, you know that once you land at the airport, it's going to take you an hour to get to a hospital. So it's much better to continue on to the next destination, which might be another 15 minutes flight, than landing there. So we provide the information for the flight crew, and they make the final decision because they have so many factors to consider beyond just the medical emergency, because it's all about making the safest decision for the entire plane.
Wow. And if I understand correctly, didn't you have to customize your products to every customer?
Country,
So,
yes.
or country? Yeah.
Yes. And we have to comply with all the government agencies worldwide. And so that's the CAAC in China, that's the Russia, that's Europe, that's Latin America. They all have their little criteria that when we're supporting their kits, for example, we have to make sure that it's in multiple languages, that it meets the criteria for the contents and any other specifics. And so, yes, being global has a big responsibility on multiple fronts, both from a regulatory standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. Mm-hmm. So we built the park, I like to say, and then they will come. And that's exactly what happened.
That's a lot of complexity to manage. Huh, that's amazing.
And it's constantly innovating. And I love to see that. And that's probably why I'm still chairman of the board, is that the company is continuing to evolve, continuing to keep the same mission and purpose, and yet advancing with technology, advancing with different services that our customers are going to need going forward. So it's very gratifying to me to see this three-legged stool change so dramatically over the years.
It's amazing. Kathy, are there any other questions?
Yes, we've got several more. I mean, you've really gotten everybody's, thought process going this morning. This one is, what is the most common emergency on airplanes?
It's not an easy answer, because when you have so many different countries that we support, and you have different environmental situations in say different countries, gastrointestinal is one of the top ones. Cardiac is probably number two. The gastrointestinal is mostly like food poisoning, and diabetes, emergency, diabetic, neurological. That could be fainting was number one forever, because I don't know if you remember the days when there was the runners that would run to catch the plane. They'd get on the aircraft, and then they pass out, and no one knew why they passed out. Did they have a heart attack, or are they just dehydrated, or did they have 3 martinis in a row before they got there? Who knows? But yeah, so neurological problems span the spectrum of anything that could happen with the brain.
Okay, our next question is from Melanie Saxon. Joan's service also impacted the maritime industry. A 911 can happen at sea as well. Ocean environments are so different, though. What's the story there? What's so different?
Maritime is that, at least the plane can land in maybe a couple of hours, or maybe even 3 hours if you're over the pond. But out at sea, I mean, these crew members on these luxury yachts or any vessel may have to manage a case for days. And so the type of training that we do for the maritime folks is very extensive, including suturing, and if they get a pneumothorax, we have to needle their chest or what have you. And this is the value of MedLink over and over again, to be able to have a physician guide the crew in how to take care of these very, very challenging situations at sea.
I cannot imagine. So this leads into the next question. How do you handle all that pressure? You know, we all feel pressure from a lot of different areas, but your pressure is life and death. So how do you, like, even personally, how do you calm yourself down in the middle of something that is so timely and has to have your full concentration? How do you get your body to relax? How do you handle that pressure?
As a flight nurse, first of all, you are so well trained. I mean, there isn't anything they can throw at you that you're not going to be able to deal with physically and professionally. You basically have tunnel vision. You are focused on the situation at hand. You're trained to do all the life-saving actions that you have to do at that moment. When it's over, when you've delivered your patient and you've taken care of all of your equipment because you may get another call, then you're we were very tight with each other as a crew. And you can't just, go to the bar and start talking about, well, we had this case here and that case there, privacy and HIPAA and, so, but we could talk among ourselves, and our families certainly knew a lot about the kind of work we did. But I like to say that we worked really, really hard, and we played really, really hard. And so, for me, my outlet was running. I used to run a lot. I would dream while I ran. I would solve problems while I ran. I would, practice my presentations while I was running, and it was also good for my health. And so, we all have our way of decompression, and we had to decompress after the kind of work that we did then. And for me, it was running, spending time with my horses, whatever time I had with my children, and turning that off, because otherwise it would eat you alive, and that wouldn't do anybody any good.
Well, we have one last question, and it's about the canvas photo in the background, Joan. Is that scene based on your real property?
Oh, I wish.
Because it's lovely.
Oh, what it is this is Queenstown, New Zealand. And my husband and I actually rode horses just like this through that river. And this is where Lord of the Rings was filmed. And so New Zealand is one of our favorite places to go, although it's so locked down now that that's impossible.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Joan, for answering all those questions. We have one more question for you, but first we want to let our listeners know what's next at the TurkNet Leadership Group.
Okay. And just to let everyone know, we have had so many people who couldn't attend today who have asked for the video of this because they knew this was going to be amazing. So we're going to be sending that out to everyone who requested it, but also we'll send the video out to all of you. So just know that you will be getting a follow-up email from all of us. So our next meetings, this is going to finish out the year, and we're finishing it out with a bang, although I don't know how we could ever top this one. Every month we say that, but this has been such an incredible experience today, Joan. It just has. Next month, Vanessa Harrison, who many of you already know from AT&T, is going to be talking to us about how she made that journey from entry level to corporate president. President AT&T Georgia. It is a fascinating story, and you can register with the link that we're going to send you, or you can go to our website and register. And then in December, we have Doretta Rhodes, who is the EVP. This is so timely. She's the EVP and Chief People Capital Officer of the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves, who are in the World Series. And we surely hope that by the time we see her in December, it will be the World Series winners, Atlanta Braves. So again, you can register with the link that we send you, or you can go to our website. Okay, next, we want to talk about Anne's Women of Character podcast. Our new segment is out right now, and it was a fascinating dialogue with Shan Cooper. Certainly those of you in the Atlanta area know all about Shan. She is a superstar in Atlanta. She just won Lifetime Achievement Award as a woman of influence for the Atlanta Business Chronicle. And in this episode, she's going to talk about her decision process that led her to become a key influencer in the public-private partnership in Atlanta between business leaders and government. It is a great story of what's happening in Atlanta, and it is a wonderful personal story from Shan. She is a great, great speaker, so I invite y'all all to listen to that. It is amazing. Then we move on to Susan Hitchcock's passion project, which is She Rose. And Susan, here is Susan, and she's supposed to be in her time of 100% flexibility. And I have to say, I think she's doing more now than she ever has. So both of these She Rose profiles are out now for you to read. They're on our website. We'll also send the links to you for them. But Aisha Khanna, talk about a global impact. You're going to love this story. And then her interview with Dr. Gladys Bolding, if you'd like to hear about someone who's made extraordinary moves in science, it's a really, really, really good story. So we urge you to go to our website or to click on the link that we're going to send you after this presentation. And now, before we return back to Anne and Joan for Joan's One Thing, which is always a highlight of our meetings, I want to invite our TLG President and CEO, Tina Mantella, who most of you already know, to join us for a special announcement about 2022.
Thank you, Kathy. Kathy, you can hear me, right? Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. First of all, Joan, thanks for coming on today. And I can tell you the kind of story of Ralphie and bringing that to life, I really appreciate that. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's going to stick with people for a long time. It certainly will me. And it makes all of us, see how we can do more, be more than we are to, help others. So thanks for sharing that. I know you've done it many times, and it's interesting to see that this emotion in you still comes out with that story after so many years, but thank you for that. So women in leadership. So of course, I think everyone would expect, given what Susan Hitchcock started, that this would continue, and we continue it with pride and excitement because of popular demand. We are going hybrid next year. We're going to come back to the Commerce Club 4 times next year, and we'll have virtual meetings the rest of the year. And our first in-person speaker is a special one, Dr. Beverly Tatum, who's a New York bestselling author and president emeritus of Spelman College. So if we can go on to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit more information. So as I said, we have 4 in-person meetings. And by the way, Ann Quello, with support from many people like Susan and others, is doing a great job of putting the 12 sessions together. We're almost 100% there. So I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, we'll be sending something out to everyone that's participated in WIL in the past and some of our new friends to talk about the program. The price, I think, is special as well. It's only $400 for the year, and that covers the 4 in-person sessions as well. And for those larger companies that are listening in, or people that have a lot of friends, you can get a table for 8 people for all those 4 sessions for only $2,500. So contact us. You see the names in the past in the bottom there. You can contact me or Kathy or Ann for more information, but we'll look forward for a great re-entry into the world of in-person in March with Dr. Tatum. Move on to the next slide. And this is something that's coming up November 18th. And we wanted as many people as possible participate in this, both Kathy and I and Lynn, a number of people participated in the first IDEA certification program. And it was certainly for me, I can speak personally that it's really important. You learn a lot, and it's an impactful program for anyone that wants to be an ambassador or learn more about diversity, equity, inclusion, to be able to deliver that, whether it's in their company or beyond that into the community. We feel it's so important that we've cut the price in half, actually. So now a participant can participate for under $1,700. And if you get a group of three, it's under $1,500. And we can work with you on monthly payments. Again, registration is growing, and we're looking for more people to participate. So again, you can contact me directly on this, or Kathy, or anyone on the TurkNet team to learn more information. But it is coming up, so take a look, and hopefully some of you will join, and we'll send this out to you as well, so you can send it to your base of influence. So on to the next slide. And this is how you get in touch with us, many different ways. So please stay in touch and contact us. I think everybody's on the newsletter, but if not, let us know and contact us for more information. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Ann and Joan for that final question.
Yes, we want to give the last word to Joan. So Joan, what is the one thing that you would like to leave for all of those who've been listening?
Well, first of all, again, thank you, Tito, for your comments. And thank you for having me today and to be able to share my story. So the one thing I think is, from the heart, be the person that you want to be. And a slogan that I've lived with and believe in completely is nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Well, Joan, it's been phenomenal. I can't thank you enough again for getting up so early in the morning to join us here at TurkNet. And thank you to all of our listeners who tuned in. And thank you to the one who chose not to clean your kitchen, but to listen in with a lot of attentiveness. So there was a lot to hear today. So thank you, Joan. I appreciate you, and take good care.
Thank you so much.